Let's talk siding. Can't leave this wood exposed forever, so let's cover it up. My contractor put a flashing piece at the base of the building. Not sure why though, because it's a drip flashing, normally used for stucco. Not really an issue, it's just there. Next, they wrapped the building. This is house wrap, and it's meant to keep water from getting inside. If water gets behind the siding for whatever reason, this is the next line of defense. They started at the bottom and worked their way to the top. Each layer overlaps the previous, so water runs down to the bottom and out where the flashing is. This was put on before I did the insulation, drywall, and plywood walls, so the outside of the building looked like this for quite a while. The next bit to work on is the eaves. The eaves will be flat, not at an angle, so some of my contractor's guys built some framing to support the soffit boards. I didn't go up and measure, but it seems like they put the boards every 12 to 16 inches or so. Next, the siding guys got to work. They started with the long wall on the far side that I didn't capture. That's what they worked on the first day, and before leaving, they put on the window trim and one piece of door trim. While some of the guys finished up the eave supports, the siding really started taking shape. With some more of the trim on, they could start putting on the siding. We decided to go with the hardy board lap siding with a smooth surface. It just has a very clean look that we are slowly working towards everywhere around our property. Now, I have some issues with how these guys put the siding on. It looks great, but the issues I have are related to waterproofing. I could be wrong, but it's my understanding that there should be thin metal flashing squares underneath the joint where two boards meet. That is, so if the water gets into the crack, it hits the flashing and runs down instead of getting behind the siding. I brought this up to them and they said they never put flashing on, just caulking at the seams, which is a whole separate issue I'll get to later. So, either it is an acceptable way of doing it, or there's a bunch of buildings in my area destined for issues down the road. I mean, technically, these walls are under eaves, but we all know rain doesn't always fall straight down. Okay, the materials for the soffits arrived, so they put those on before finishing the top of the walls. All the progress was really making this building start to look finished. We've envisioned this for quite some time now, and it's exciting to see it come to fruition. I'm going to build sliding exterior barn doors for this entrance. So in order to hold the rail and track, they put a 2x10 beam across the top and 2x6 boards along the sides. This wall was going pretty good, but here's where I have another issue. There's a Z flashing just on top of the beam, but the house wrap should have been flapped over the siding, or at least taped across the seam, instead of what it is here, which is the flashing on top of the house wrap. The way it is now, moisture could run down the house wrap, behind the flashing, and get trapped at the beam. It would not have been hard to do it the right way. I just shake my head. Luckily, here in SoCal, we don't get as much rain as other areas of the country. So while it is a concern, it's not as much of a concern as it could be. We're almost always in a drought anyway. What's funny is that for the windows and doors, the flashing was tucked underneath the house wrap. So it was done correctly some of the time, just not all the time. Anyway, they kept putting up the siding, which was looking really good. And when they finished with the siding, the only thing left to do was caulk all the edges and seams. It was a lot of work caulking all the seams, but there's a lot of spots they missed or didn't put enough down to cover the seam. I hate to sound so negative, but these are the details that make a difference in 10, 20, 30 years to prevent rot and mold and such. The building looks great on the outside, but under the hood there are some issues. It's like the Batmobile having a motor from a junky old car. Yeah, it'll get the job done, but it could be better. It's examples like this that explain why I like to do the work myself. I know I'll do a thorough job to make it the best it can be. The guys that did the siding don't have an invested interest in making sure the building will last as long as it can. They're just going on to the next job tomorrow. P.S. I didn't hire these guys, my contractor did, and I didn't catch these mistakes until looking at the footage after it was done. Although, Doofy was pretty excited about all this, and celebrated by doing a lap around the building. After the siding was done, the rain came, and we got storm after storm that just dumped a ton of water. Unfortunately, the drainage for this area isn't in yet, and all the water collects around the building and in the trenches. It's a huge pain. I had a sump pump going to move the water to the other side of my backyard where it could be filtered and properly drained. All the water turned the area around the building into a mud pit. And just when it started to dry up, we always got hit again with more rain. Right at the end of December, we got a pretty gnarly windstorm that just blew a bunch of stuff all over the place. But also came at a good time because it dried up everything from the rain we just got. The ground was finally solid enough that I could put up a ladder without worrying about the ground giving way. It was still kind of muddy in some areas, but I needed to get back to work. All the rain caused so much dirt and crud to splash on the lower boards of the siding. Before doing anything, I needed to clean those off. I bought a pressure washer instead of renting or borrowing because this is definitely something I'll be getting more use out of down the road. I tested it on a dirty post, and it worked pretty darn well. So I got to work cleaning off the building. It's important that you have a clean surface to paint. You don't want to paint over dirt or spider webs or stuff like that. I just had to be careful not to splash any dirt back up onto the building, which I did a few times. I let all that dry for the rest of the day before moving on. As I said earlier, I was less than impressed with the finished work of the siding. I have some issues with the quality of the waterproofing, mainly the caulking. So I worked on fixing all the errors that were left behind. You can see that there are gaps at the siding joints that were not completely filled in with caulk. So I painstakingly went around the entire building, checked every seam to make sure it was up to my standards. I don't want to have water damage issues down the road, so I'm doing everything that I can to prevent it. I also filled all the nail holes, including on the inside of the door jamb. I was probably going to double check their work on this anyway, but I didn't expect to have to do so much fixing. Next step in the process is taping. It's important to cover anything that you don't want painted. I started with the roof. There's a charcoal colored flashing overhanging the roof's edge that does not get painted. I went around the entire roof line and taped the bottom of the flashing. Now, originally, I was going to put a 3-foot sheet of plastic around the entire roof edge to protect from overspray, but soon after rolling the sheet and attempting to tape it down, I realized this was just not going to work. So I scrapped the plastic sheet and brought out a roll of 18-inch paper. I rolled it out along the edge and overlapped this tape with the tape on the flashing. The masking tape I was using doesn't work so well sticking to the asphalt shingles, so I brought out some duct tape to tape the upper edge. I worked my way around the entire building, creating a nice protective layer. I was contemplating putting the plastic above the paper to protect higher up on the roof, since now it would be easier to tack it down, but I opted out. I'll be good and won't overspray onto the roof. Famous last words. Don't worry, it all worked out fine. For the doors, I taped the threshold at the bottom, making sure all the metal was covered. I wrapped up the door in tape and plastic, and I also taped the seal around the edge. I pulled the flap back a bit and really made sure it was well covered. This part is not meant to get paint on it. The jamb that is visible from the outside will get painted with everything else. I taped over the window, first putting tape on the outer edge, then covering the bulk of the window with plastic. I covered the water pipes, air conditioning tubes, electrical outlets, and light sockets, just making sure paint wouldn't get sprayed where it shouldn't. I also put this plastic sheet back up over the big workshop entrance. I've been using this plastic to protect the workshop during the rainstorms. I stapled it around the edges like before, but this time I taped the outer edge and taped up all the holes and slices. I don't want any overspray to get inside the workshop and land on the clean floor or new plywood walls. Overall, I spent more time prepping for paint than it actually took to paint. It took a good chunk of a day to mask everything properly. I also had to run to the store at some point because I ran out of tape partway through. But when the prep work was done, it was time to paint. I rented a heavy-duty airless sprayer and bought 2 5-gallon buckets of ultra-pure white paint. I didn't really have any say in the color, or lack thereof. That was the lady boss's decision. I've never used a sprayer like this before, but did plenty of research beforehand. I rented this thing, and it's obviously been used. So first thing was to make sure it was cleaned out of any paint from its previous use. I'm painting white, so it really needed to be clean as could be. I got a clean bucket of water and flushed it well, continuing to flush until I no longer saw any paint, then flushed it for a bit longer. Whoever used it last didn't flush it well, because it took me at least 20 minutes to clean it before starting. I was thinking about just pulling the paint straight from the 5-gallon bucket, but then decided to dump the paint into a clean bucket to pull from. I loaded up the sprayer with paint and brought the hose over to the building. I did a test on a portion of the building that I'll see every time I walk to my workshop. So no pressure or anything. Go big or go home. The test looked pretty good, so I got to work. I started with the top and worked my way down. I had already painted the fascia board white before they installed the roof, but it needed just another hit with the sprayer to give it an extra layer of protection. I hopped up on the ladder and hit the fascia board, the underside of the eaves, and the upper portions of the wall. For a rookie, I'd say it was going pretty good. I was just making sure I got enough coverage and wasn't caking on the paint. If it was runny, that's too much. I worked my way down the building, putting the ladder in probably not the best of situations, but I didn't really have another choice. I may not have the best technique here, but I'll blame that on my sketchy ladder. Ideally, you're supposed to spray in long, flat streaks, not these big arches. When I got to the end of the wall, I worked my way down to the ground, and then worked my way back, doing the lower sections. For every layer, I overlapped the previous layer by 50%. So each bit on the wall ideally got hit twice. As I got to the bottom of the wall, I just sprayed right onto the concrete foundation to where it meets with the dirt. I was really trying my best to get good coverage on the wall, hitting the bottom edge of each row of siding and getting enough paint on each seam. Overall, it was going pretty good. I was having issues with the spray nozzle spitting some extra paint. I'm a first timer, so I don't know if it was me or the machine. Either way, I had a roller handy to smooth it out. I hit a small problem here. I didn't tape the top left corner of the window plastic, so a bit of paint got on the glass. No worries though, I'll show you how I fixed that afterwards. I added the missing tape and got back to work. Okay, next problem. This is definitely a risk with renting tools. While I was painting, the sprayer was having a party on its own. Thank goodness I had a tarp down to catch most of the mess, but not all of it. It appears that one of the connections was loose and caused paint to squirt out. It was kind of too late to fix because it was so messy. I had to move the sprayer anyway to reach the other walls, so I moved it to the dirt where a little mess was inconsequential. It was just unfortunate that so much paint was wasted. I didn't think I'd run out because I was halfway done, so I just kept chugging along. It probably took about 30 to 45 minutes to spray each side. I started painting at 8:30 a.m. and was done by 11. I wanted to start early to get going before the sun warmed up the siding, and I finished way before the sun could warm up anything. I had to move the sprayer a bit to reach the far end of this wall, and I stupidly placed it in a spot where it splattered all over the wall. I didn't even notice until I was about to spray that part, either because I was so focused or my safety glasses were getting covered with paint splatter. When I went to hit a missed spot in the corner, I made a really smart choice of where to stand. Yeah, I got hit. So I switched to a roller. Okay, and that was it for this machine. I did a really thorough job cleaning the sprayer by flushing it with water and cleaning all the splattered paint, so the next person, won't have as difficult a time starting like I did. Later in the day, after a well-deserved shower, I came back out and took off all the masking. For the little bit of paint that got on the window glass, I used a razor blade and gently scraped it away. Easy peasy. I did a pretty good job taping up the doors, so this took a bit of effort to free up. It was important that they were protected. Well worth the effort, in my opinion. And I had a little fun with this one. I popped back on the roof to take off the masking up there. Up close, I could see a tiny bit of overspray in a few spots, but from the ground, it was not noticeable at all. On to the doors. It's been my wife's dream to have a white house with a powder blue door. So I picked up 3 samples of blue that I thought would work and painted them on for a test. Lo and behold, we hated all 3. So I picked up 3 more samples. I invited people to vote on Instagram which one they liked best, but the election was rigged. Okay, the votes are in, and by votes, I mean vote. Tell them which one is the winner.
Number 1 on the bottom.
That one is the winner after tallying all the vote. The lady boss has spoken, so I got to work. I removed the handles and taped up both doors really well, and just used a sample jar that I had to paint. It was enough to do 1 coat on both doors, but not enough for a second coat. I ended up buying a quart so I'd have extra for touch-ups and stuff. This color is called Oslo Blue. I asked the lady boss if I could paint my workshop door a different color blue, like a true blue or Dodger blue. She threw the veto, so powder blue for me. Don't worry, doors can easily be painted down the road if she chooses. Doofy gave his paw of approval, so that's good enough for me. While looking at the building, I noticed a few areas of the walls that were a tad bit underpainted. A few spots where I went a little light with the sprayer. So I decided to go through and make sure those areas were properly coated. I bought a super cheap sprayer from Harbor Freight, and boy was that a mistake. It worked for just a small portion of the wall. Then I had to give up and just use a roller, which was fine. I painted all the areas that needed a little extra love, and now I feel really good about tackling this part of the build all on my own. Now, with the siding on and painted, this building is really starting to come together. I think it looks great, both on the inside and out. Every step forward is one step closer to being done. Okay, that's it for now. See ya. No. I'm just covered in paint. Ugh.